Today was a challenging day. I did work on a heavy project, very time consuming. Even when everything was done, I found that there is an issue that is going to be extremely hard to solve. I was working on this Lexar SD card with the fully custom pinout, and ends up that 7 data bus signals are found. But the 8th signal is nowhere on the top surface. I did get a donor card with the case supplied, but unfortunately the donor card is different. The card that I have wired up to a breakout adapter right now has exact same pinout as this card that is a completely separate case. But the cause for the recovery is exactly the same. We need to recover data because it was formatted on a Sony camera. And if it was formatted on a Sony camera, the data is not going to be accessible through the interface. There's no software that will magically get this content back. If you found yourself in a situation where you accidentally formatted something important like a wedding on your Sony camera without backing up those photos, you're going to need to check the link in the description, because the only way to get it back would be through this process. Now if you look at this card, you see all of these traces up here. Okay, these traces correspond with certain signals. I should note that this card does not have available schematic anywhere online through the vendors of the equipment, and this is the one I'm working on. So this is what it looks like once it's all stripped down and soldered up. If we have absolutely no other hopes for getting this done, I can carefully go around the ground planes. We will see how we get through the layers. It's not going to be like instant, oh, you burned too fast and you damaged something on the layer underneath it. We'll expose the copper, then we'll eventually grind through the copper, then there will be another layer of compound. We'll start getting through the compound, and eventually we'll see another layer of copper going out. So it's gonna be kind of like a very tread lightly type of moment, but that's only if we don't get a donor. So I'm really hoping that the client whose card this is will have another one like it that we can put to use and get it recovered. I started this video to bump my mood up. The way I'm gonna bump my mood up is through repairing this device and hopefully getting that off of it. Nothing more satisfactory than solving a case. So we got a Lexar unit. Let me see if this is the case from it. Yes, it is. It's a 64. It's also 250 speed. But look at this. It came in. I thought it was you know, worked by someone before because the label was completely peeled. But then the case was somewhat sealed. Like I couldn't tell if it was opened before, but it was really nicely sealed. If it was glued back in, they did an amazing job. But look at this. There's a burnt hole right through the case. So something on this device got super hot. And if we lay it over, if I had to guess, it's going to be one of these capacitors. Something blew up really heavily. Over here the controller is got a burn mark on it. These are the capacitors, I think, started to boil up and melted the plastic. So usually what happens with these cards, and these cards were my favorite cards to work with. The design of it's got problems all over. I'm not saying this just to say it, but it literally has problems coming at it at every single side. So I'm gonna use this blank SD adapter to show you. So when you plug in your card to a reader, right, it's gonna have some of it stick out. On some devices it's gonna go further. I know that on my older Mac it would stick out about this much. So this much is hanging over, right? If we start flexing it, this plastic may bend. So let's say you're plugged your card into the laptop and you're transferring the photos, then you got distracted and somebody pulled the cord, or you turned around and this whole laptop just goes flying onto the side where the card is plugged in. What's going to happen to this card, do you guys think? It's going to start binding. It's going to start bending. Maybe it won't show signs of failure or physical damage because the plastic, let's just say it's flexible. But what's inside is not so flexible. So what's going to happen if we bend this is that it's going to start to pivot in one way or the other depending on where it's going to go. So on the top side, our main risks, pads can separate from the board, and if they separate from the board, well, c'est la vie to the data. It's not going to be accessible through the interface because the chip is disconnected. In that case, your device is going to report much smaller capacity, much smaller capacity. So this is a 64 gig and it will report something about 7 gigs or something like that. That's a silicone motion safe mode feature that it's going to indicate that that is the reason why your device comes up with a smaller capacity, and you can use that as a clue. So that means the controller probably survived the fall, but the chip got disconnected. Sometimes when it bends the other way, the chip is gonna get fractured because it's not that controller in the back here is not flexible, and then you can clearly see that it's got a fracture running through it, and that's what most likely initiated that short that created a burn, melted the plastic over, and stopped this whole thing from working, right? So cracked controller, card is done, totaled. What would be the solution? Well, we need to find a new host for that card. We need to find another platform where that card will function. We need to swap these memory chips over to something that is compatible. Now, in my practice, there are several revisions of these cards. They look exactly the same or very close to it, and they're not interchangeable. Ask me how I know. I know because I worked on hundreds of these cards. I'm not exaggerating, guys. I literally was thinking about making an adapter for it that would have similar sockets for BGA chips to something like this, that we can just take off chips and drop them in there. But the problem is that the controller on this device, it's not removable. If I could remove the controller, I would R&D this card to a point where I can just build my own circuit board. We wouldn't have to do any soldering, just carefully remove the chips and then plug them in. Somewhat like I do for some of my SanDisk devices right here. This device is a SanDisk flash drive. It doesn't have attached memory to it. It has this clamp socket that I open up, and there's the chip. The chip can be quickly removed. If I get the same device, same controller, same capacity, I can just simply put the new memory in there and close up these two. Close these two up, and it's done. So something like that I would want to build for this device, but it was just too much of a hassle to have, like, to purchase these sockets, then have a circuit board to reroute them, and then run wires off of here, create a new interface. Like, it's all doable, but it's just it's for me, I found another way. Let's just say I found another way that is somewhat easy as well. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna set this aside. What I have here prepped for you guys is my device, my solution, my way of handling this problem. So as I mentioned, there are several revisions of this type of board that makes them interchangeable. There are things that I look for that make them match, and I have made several of these devices where I would just transfer over the chip or two chips, and then using this SD interface, I get the content out. These cards are becoming less and less used, and soon enough they'll be all obsolete, because what seems to be happening, even though the Lexar still sells these, they are being sold as those monolithics now. Monolithic memory cards in this kind of shape are coming in very, very frequently. This specific card that I'm using right now on this host adapter is actually a card that I had a pleasure to repair in the past. And it's not it wasn't a working card at first. It was a card that came in with a problem, and I'll show you what that problem was. That problem was, as I mentioned, when this device gets flexed, solder joints will separate from the board. The bond between the pad on the chip and is way, way stronger than the pad and the board. The board's pads can be peeled off very easily. As you can see, like, this whole row is missing. A bunch of them is missing here. These are not critical. Everything that's outside of this rectangle, it's not critical. Some of the connections inside of the rectangle also not critical. How do we know? Because if we look underneath the light, it's not connected to anything. Alright, but the ones that were important, I made coil wires for them, and now this card is working. And it actually helped to recover a lot of cases. I would say at least a couple of dozen cases were solved using this broken card. So whoever sent me this card in the past, just know that your paying forward gesture to let me keep this device had helped many people get reunited with their data. This is what we're going to do today. So this chip goes here, this chip goes here. The dots are on top, and that corner right there and right there. The board is cleaned. Now we got to remove it from the patient. 365 to take them off. After working in this office for over 2 years, the time had finally come to make some changes. I feel like this specific desk setup is not the best for the work. I mean, it's facing the sun side, so it's getting super hot for the tech stuff. Yeah, some pads came off, but that's probably because of the bending. I wouldn't worry about it at all. We don't care about this board. The board can actually go to trash after we're done with it. But we do need to clean up these chips. So get some wick to clean them, and we're gonna be set to reball. Reballing is the process where all of these sphere-shaped solder balls underneath get rejuvenated. Not rejuvenated, but remade. At the beginning of this video I mentioned that sometimes you would plug in your Lexar device and it will report a much smaller capacity. We'll have a chance to actually replicate that scenario today, because smaller capacity comes up when your memory is not connected properly or fully, or if it's not connected at all. In our case, our host currently does not have anything connected to it, so if it doesn't have anything connected to it, why not demonstrate what that capacity will be, and we'll use that for the title of this video. We can use an adapter for SD card and plug it in directly to a USB port on our computer, but I have USB stabilizer here, so I'll plug that in to the USB stabilizer instead and fire up the device. So 7.6 gigabytes for Lexar card is what you would normally see if your memory is not connected properly. I'm trying this new paste. So far it's been working pretty good for me. Yeah, looks good. Flux is on top, flux is on the bottom, and now I just gotta lay the chips back on, line them up slightly, and we can go at it. So alignment for this board is designed initially to accommodate two types of chips, BGA 152 and BGA 132. Essentially, they're the same pinout, so the schematic for them is exact same, but 152 has extra set of 10 pins on each side, so they're wider. That's why we're seeing these pads stick out. So our aim is to kind of let them go right in between, but Lexar really thought of everything, and they made these notches to show you where the chip should land, which is beautiful. So here I want to start with the bottom chip, because we have a connector wired up to the top there, even though it's covered in the in a green mask. I don't want to have it heated up for too long. And I would rather heat it at higher temperature and let the solder melt faster than keep it at the lower temperature and heating it for longer. See, that way our board preheats way quicker and it's ready for the top chip faster, so we're actually heating up the top chip a little bit less than the bottom one. Something that I should have paid more attention at the beginning, but it's no big deal. These regulatory resistors, they are set up in a different way. We're gonna adjust them. Same way as they are on the board here. Power up the device again, capacity comes up. If we refresh it, anything changed? Yes. So that resistor being in the wrong place was either deactivating or activating incorrect C parameters, and therefore we were not seeing the data. But right now we do. So if we look in the first sector, we should see some signature of 55AA. This time it shows up as EOS digital exFAT, and we can see the images right away. So if we go into file mask, deleted items, empty folders, exclude them, we see the images all up here. So that's it, guys. Time to clone this device and notify my client that the data is saved. That's how I deal with shitty situations where the day does not go right, and always try to have at least 1 or 2 easy cases that you can bank on for sure, that you're gonna resolve, and turn your frown upside down, how they say.